My name is Inez Seitz, and I am 33 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed I had won the kind of love people secretly envy, the steady kind, the kind that grows quietly, without fireworks or chaos, until one day you realize you've built your entire sense of safety around another human being. That human being was my husband, Daniel Seitz. We met when I was 19 and he was 20 at my cousin's wedding. I still remember how out of place he looked among the champagne flutes and forced smiles, hands tucked awkwardly into his pockets, eyes scanning the room like he was trying to escape without being rude. When our eyes met, something in me settled. It wasn't passion or excitement. It was certainty, a calm, terrifying certainty. I told my best friend that night, half joking, I think I just met the man I'll marry. I wasn't joking. We got married a year later, sooner than planned, because I became pregnant with our daughter, Stella. She's 12 now, sharp-tongued, perceptive, and already far too aware of the emotional temperature in a room. Our son, Noah, came 6 years later. He's 6, sweet, endlessly curious, and burdened with a severe peanut allergy that has ruled our household since the day he was diagnosed. Daniel cried when Stella was born, full, chest-heaving sobs. I remember thinking, this is a good man. This is a safe man. That belief carried me through everything that came next. My parents, however, never shared my confidence. They come from generational wealth, the kind that isn't flashy but seeps into everything, into assumptions and expectations. They never openly accused Daniel of marrying me for money, but they didn't need to. Their silence was heavy with judgment. They insisted on a prenup before agreeing to the wedding. I fought them at first. Daniel stopped me. It's fine, he said gently. I get it, it's just paperwork. He signed it without hesitation, smiled, kissed my cheek, and told me he loved me. Looking back, that moment plays in my mind on a loop. Not because of what happened, but because of how little resistance there was. Our wedding was everything Daniel said he didn't care about, and everything I secretly wanted. Big, loud, lavish. My parents paid for most of it because we were still students, and though they disapproved of Daniel, they disapproved even more of me touching my trust fund before maturity. There were awkward moments, snide comments from extended family, subtle power plays between both sides, but nothing that felt like a warning. The marriage itself, at least at first, was peaceful. We were busy, exhausted, in love. After graduation, I joined my father's firm and quickly became the primary earner. I was soon making close to 7 figures a year. Daniel worked a flexible job at a locally owned business, enough income to contribute, enough freedom to be present with the kids. I didn't mind being the provider. I liked it. Daniel often joked that he was retired early, and I laughed along because I trusted him completely. He never pressured me for money. I gave freely, joint accounts, shared cards, no questions asked. If anything, I told myself I was lucky. Daniel never wanted me to feel like he was dependent. He always emphasized that he had his own ambitions, his own plans. I believed him, until the night he sat down on the edge of our bed and said, "Can we talk about something sensitive?" His voice was careful, rehearsed, the kind of tone you use when you already know the answer, but hope for a different one anyway. I nodded, folding laundry, unprepared for the direction the conversation would take. He asked how I felt about threesomes. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so unexpected it didn't feel real. Years earlier, back when we were dating, we had talked about it once and mutually agreed it wasn't something either of us wanted. We valued exclusivity, trust, the absence of doubt. I reminded him of that. He nodded, then said something that made my stomach drop. I already had someone in mind. Her name was Rachel, his ex-girlfriend from high school, a woman I knew by name, by vague stories, by her presence at our wedding. Daniel had always insisted their relationship ended cleanly. No lingering feelings, no unresolved tension. She's open-minded, he said carefully, and I think it could be good for us, an experience. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just said no. Firmly, calmly, without hesitation. I told him it crossed a boundary we had already agreed on, that it would invite insecurity into a marriage that didn't need it, that I wasn't comfortable, and that should have been enough. For a moment, I saw disappointment flicker across his face. Not anger, not resentment, something quieter, colder. Then he smiled and said he understood. I just wanted to ask, he said. I'd never force you. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, rolled over and went to sleep like nothing had happened. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. At the time, I didn't know that suggestion wasn't curiosity. It was a test, and I had already failed it by trusting him. The first real crack didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, on an ordinary weekday that was supposed to end like every other. Noah had been home with a temporary babysitter that afternoon. Our regular nanny was sick, and the replacement was only meant to stay a few hours. I remember hesitating before leaving for work that morning, running through the usual checklist in my head. EpiPen? Peanut-free snacks? Stella's peanut treats locked in her mini fridge? Noah had lived with his allergy long enough to understand the rules. He knew not to eat anything unfamiliar. But he was 6, and 6-year-olds trust the world more than they should. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. Once, then again. I ignored it at first. I shouldn't have. By the time I stepped out to call back, my hands were shaking. The babysitter was crying. Stella had taken a chocolate snack from her room earlier, one that contained traces of peanuts. She'd been distracted, called away to help with something, and left it in the main fridge. Noah had found it later. Chocolate was his weakness. He didn't know it was dangerous. He went into anaphylaxis within minutes. The babysitter called an ambulance immediately. Stella rode with them, pale and silent, clutching Noah's hand while he struggled to breathe. They rushed him to the hospital. I asked the one question that mattered. "Where's Daniel?" She hesitated. I called him first," she said. "He didn't answer for a while. Then he came, but he left." My heart dropped into my stomach. According to the babysitter, Daniel arrived at the hospital, spoke briefly with the nurses, muttered something about it not being serious, and said he had urgent work to attend to. Then he walked out. Left his son in an emergency room. Left our daughter with a babysitter who didn't know what to do. Left. I drove to the hospital in a haze, my mind screaming one question over and over. Why would he do that? Noah was stable by the time I arrived. The doctors told me the reaction hadn't been as severe as it could have been, only because the ambulance had arrived quickly. They monitored him for a few hours, ran tests, reassured me that he would be fine. I thanked them through tears I didn't realize were falling. I paid the babysitter extra, apologized repeatedly, hugged Stella until she cried into my jacket. And still Daniel wasn't there. I tried calling him, straight to voicemail. When we finally left the hospital and headed home, a knot tightened in my chest. Something felt off, wrong in a way I couldn't explain. On a whim, I stopped by Daniel's workplace. I told myself I was just checking in, that maybe he'd been pulled into an emergency meeting, that maybe I was being unfair. His boss looked confused when I asked for him. "Daniel," he repeated. "He clocked out hours ago, said there was a family emergency." My vision blurred. I thanked him, walked back to my car, and sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. If he wasn't at work, and he wasn't at the hospital, then where was he? I called Daniel again. This time he answered. "Hey," he said casually. "Everything okay?" I swallowed hard. "Where are you?" "At work," he replied without hesitation. The lie slid off his tongue effortlessly. I didn't call him out. Not then. Something in me knew that if I did, he'd just lie again. Instead, I told him what the doctors had said, told him Noah was okay, told him we were on our way home. "Oh," he said, "that's good. I'll be home soon." When he came through the door later that evening, he acted like nothing had happened. He hugged the kids, kissed my cheek, asked what was for dinner. We laughed, ate together, put the kids to bed. Every smile felt like glass in my mouth. That night, Daniel fell asleep easily. I didn't. I waited until his breathing deepened, then carefully lifted his phone from the nightstand. We had always shared passwords. I'd never had a reason to doubt him. He had access to everything of mine. I had access to everything of his. Or so I thought. I checked messages first. Nothing unusual. Photos. Clean. Emails. Boring. WhatsApp. Empty of anything suspicious. For a moment, relief washed over me, and then anger at myself for doubting him. Then I opened Facebook. It prompted me for an app lock. My stomach dropped. Daniel barely used Facebook. When he did, it was to scroll mindlessly or check in on old friends. There was no reason for an app lock, and yet, there it was. I tried guessing the password. My birthday. Noah's. Stella's. His father's. Nothing. The security question appeared. "When is her birthday?" "Her." My hands went cold. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, trying to make sense of it. On impulse, I remembered something Daniel probably hadn't. His old tablet. The one he'd stopped using after getting a new one. The one he'd handed down to the kids. The one that had been tossed into a drawer months ago. I waited until morning. After Daniel left for work and the kids went to school, I dug through the closet until I found it. It still worked, still held a charge. And when I opened Facebook, he was still logged in. I clicked on his messages. And just like that, the life I thought I had shattered. There were hundreds of messages, years worth, between Daniel and Rachel. Messages mocking me, mocking my trust, mocking the fact that I paid for everything while they laughed behind my back. Messages about hotel meetups disguised as work trips, about money he'd taken from our joint account to send her, about how he'd never really loved me the way he loved her. One message froze my blood. I should have never married her, but the money made it worth it. I felt something inside me break, cleanly, decisively. I didn't cry right away. I took screenshots. Every message, every date, every confession. And as I did, a terrifying calm settled over me. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I don't remember sitting down. One moment I was standing in the middle of the bedroom, holding Daniel's old tablet like it might explode in my hands. The next, I was on the floor with my back against the bed, knees pulled to my chest, staring at a screen that kept proving, over and over again, that my marriage had been a lie. The messages didn't start recently. That was the first thing that shattered me. They went back years, farther than I wanted to admit. Threads of flirtation woven between mundane conversations about groceries and school pickups, inside jokes that excluded me, plans disguised as errands, work trips that were never work trips at all. Rachel wasn't a mistake. She was a parallel life. They talked about me like I was a character in a joke they'd both grown tired of telling. She's so trusting. She never checks the account. Sometimes I feel bad, but then I remember the lifestyle. I scrolled until my fingers cramped, until the words blurred together, until pain stopped feeling sharp and became dull, like pressure building behind my eyes. There were messages from the day Noah went into anaphylaxis. Rachel, where are you? Daniel, hospital, kid thing. I'll leave soon. Rachel, already? Daniel, she's overreacting. I'll be there. I tasted bile. He hadn't just left our son. He'd left him for her. I wanted to scream, to throw the tablet across the room, to wake Daniel, shove the screen in his face, and demand an explanation that I already knew wouldn't satisfy me. Instead, I did something I never thought I was capable of. I became methodical. I took screenshots of everything. Conversations, dates, bank transfers, photos I didn't want to see but forced myself to document anyway. I sent them all to my phone, created folders, backed them up to cloud storage I knew Daniel couldn't access. Then I erased my footprints. I deleted the screenshots from the tablet, cleared the cache, closed the app. By the time I was done, my hands were steady. That terrified me more than the tears ever could have. Daniel came home that evening and kissed me like usual, asked how my day was, complimented dinner. I watched his mouth move and wondered how long he'd been practicing lying like that. That night, I didn't confront him. I waited. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life of my own. On the surface, nothing changed. I laughed at Daniel's jokes. I packed his lunches. I kissed him goodbye in the mornings. I listened while he talked about work, about stress, about being tired. Underneath, I watched everything. I used the tablet whenever I could, when he showered, when he slept, when he was working late. I followed their conversations in real time, took screenshots, built my case quietly. Rachel grew bolder. She complained about me openly, about how long Daniel was taking to leave, about how inconvenient kids were, about how she hated that he still had to play husband. Daniel reassured her. Soon, just a little longer. I need to do this right. The audacity of that word, right, made my chest ache. I contacted a lawyer without telling anyone. It felt surreal, sitting in a quiet office while a stranger explained my options in a calm, professional voice. The prenup my parents insisted on all those years ago suddenly became the most valuable document I owned. No alimony, clear asset separation, custody discussions, but nothing that favored him by default. I signed retainer papers with a hand that didn't shake. At home, Daniel started planning another work trip, a hotel stay. Rachel asked for the room number before he even arrived. That was when I knew. I printed the screenshots, hundreds of pages, conversations reduced to black ink on white paper, ugly, undeniable, impossible to spin. I placed them in a thick envelope and left it in my car. The morning of the meetup, Daniel kissed me goodbye and said he'd be late. I smiled and wished him a good day. Then I waited until he left and called my parents. I told them everything. There was silence on the other end of the line when I finished. Then my mother said my name softly, like she was afraid I might break if she said it too loudly. They didn't say we told you so. Not yet. They offered to help with the kids. I accepted. I packed bags for Stella and Noah, while my heart cracked a little more with every folded shirt. I told them they were having a sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's. Stella looked at me too closely but didn't ask questions. Children always know when something is wrong. I watched the driver take them away and stood in the driveway long after the car disappeared. Then I got in my own car and drove to the hotel. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. I took the elevator to the floor I already knew, walked down the hall like I belonged there. When I knocked, Daniel answered the door wearing nothing but a towel. His face went blank. Behind him, Rachel's voice called out, "Who is it?" I stepped inside without asking permission. Rachel was on the bed, wrapped in white sheets, eyes wide with recognition. For a second, none of us moved. Then I dropped the envelope. Pages scattered across the floor like confetti from a celebration that never should have existed. Messages, photos, proof. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You left our son in the hospital for this." Daniel reached for me. I stepped back. And then I left. I made it to my car before the tears came. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook me until I could barely breathe. I cried for the woman I'd been, for the marriage I thought I had, for the future that had already been rewritten without my consent. But when the tears stopped, something else took their place. Resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ending the lie. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for nearly half an hour, hands locked around the steering wheel, breathing in short, broken pulls of air. The hotel loomed behind me like a bad memory already trying to fade, but my body hadn't caught up yet. Shock has a way of lagging behind truth. When I finally drove, it wasn't toward comfort. It was toward logistics. I stopped at the office first. I needed copies, more copies than I already had. I fed stacks of paper into the printer until the machine whined in protest. Every message, every date, every lie. I organized them into neat piles, clipped and labeled, as if turning chaos into order could also make it hurt less. It didn't, but it made me feel steady. By the time I got home, the house felt unfamiliar, too quiet, too clean. Daniel's shoes were by the door, exactly where he always left them. The mundane normalcy made my stomach twist. I poured myself a glass of wine I didn't want and didn't finish. When Daniel came home, it was already dark. He didn't pretend this time. He walked in slowly, eyes red, face strained, as if he were the one wronged. He tried to speak, but I raised a hand. "Sit down," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost detached. He sat. I went upstairs, retrieved the envelope I'd prepared earlier, the one with the divorce papers inside, and came back down. I placed it on the table between us. "We can do this 2 ways," I said evenly. "You can sign these papers quietly, or I can make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." He stared at the envelope like it was a bomb. "Inez," he whispered, reaching for my hand. "Please, it was a mistake. We can fix this." I laughed then. A short, humorless sound that surprised even me. "You left our son in a hospital bed," I said. "You lied to my face while I held him and thought he might die. There is nothing left to fix." His shoulders slumped. I laid out the terms. Full custody of the kids. Supervised visitation at first. Something I knew he'd fight in court, but something I also knew would scare him. No alimony, no assets beyond what the prenup already allowed. Clean. Quiet. "If you don't sign," I continued, "Rachel's married friend finds out. Her workplace finds out. Your parents find out. Everyone finds out. And I won't lie for you. Ever." He cried. I didn't. He asked what I'd tell the kids. "I'll tell them what they need to know," I said, "not what makes you feel better." He refused to sign that night. I expected that. So I gave him 5 minutes to pack a bag. When the door closed behind him, I didn't collapse. I didn't scream. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall until the house settled around me again. Later, alone, I poured another glass of wine and finally let myself cry. Not because I wanted him back, but because letting go hurts even when it's necessary. I don't know exactly what comes next, but I do know this: the woman who trusted blindly is gone, and the woman who remains will never ignore the cracks again.